started with about 650 million US dollars, and then crowded in the rest of it from financial markets. It's not so much in the amount of money, but more in the model. And I think it's that model that if we're able to leverage that model, we can do a lot more, just in terms of being able to bring in the kind of capital resources we need. We also have an infraco, which basically is jointly owned by the AFC, the NSI, our Sovereign Wealth Fund. AFC, I think, has something about 25% of it. The Sovereign Wealth Fund, about 15%. And the CBN, our government, has about 60% of it. Now we started with a seed fund of about 1 trillion naira. And the whole idea, of course, is to crowd in about another 15 trillion naira for infrastructure projects, rail, roads, ports, etc. So I think it's really more in the modeling, the models that we're creating. The AFC, of course, is one of the sound models that was founded about 15 years ago with all of this in mind, with African infrastructure in mind. And of course, it originated from here. So the AFC is one great model of what we're doing. And, just as I've said, Infraco and a few others. But I think what to look at is not so much the amounts that have been raised today, but more the models and what they represent and the sorts of aspirations that we should expect using those models.
If I can pick up on that, because you've talked about the need for a model that works. The AFC started 15 years ago. We've seen the results of having this forward thinking when it comes to the institutions that carry this out. So what opportunities are you seeing today for more institutions, not just in Nigeria, around Africa, that can do the sort of thing the AFC started doing 15 years ago?
I think the opportunities are immense. I think they are huge opportunities. And it is even possible now, in my view, to do a bit more. And for me, I think what will count in the coming years will be more innovation. How we're going to innovate around, for example, climate finance. How more innovative will we be? Because these are the real areas of need. We need loads of money for adaptation and mitigation for climate finance, where we, for example, in Nigeria need something in the order of about 400 billion US dollars above business as usual spending over the next 30 years odd. So there's a huge gap there. But I think I think innovation is what will play a significant part. And just listening to Samaila a moment ago, you get the sense that if we're innovative enough, we can do a lot. So, for example, I think that just using some of the models that already exist, there's plenty of room for more green bonds. There's plenty of room for more B loans, and as you said, insurance guarantees that have not yet been leveraged, that have not yet been used. So I think that we're actually crying out for innovation. Most of what has been done elsewhere simply hasn't been done here. And I think the opportunities are opening up, and it will take forward-looking governments in Africa to think in terms of how to leverage our own balance sheets, our sovereign balance sheets, working with the likes of AFC and other development finance institutions to see what we can do about this. But I think it will take sitting together and trying to be a bit more creative and a bit more innovative.
As Mr. Zubairu called it, finnovation as well. And that does bring us to that big question about climate change, because while we in Africa are talking about, a lot of the world is talking about scaling back. It's talking about reducing emissions. There's this net zero emissions target that the world is trying to reach. And you've been quite vocal about this. You've written recently for The Economist. You had something in Foreign Affairs magazine. And I just want to read out something you wrote. You said, for countries such as my own, Nigeria, which is rich in natural resources, but still energy poor, that transition must not come at the expense of affordable and reliable energy. Still 600 million people across this continent without power. But how do we have the conversation about continuing to invest in fossil fuels when the world is saying we can't do that anymore?
I think, first of all, Africa, of course, needs to come together to put out a vision that is ours, for climate change and for carbon neutrality by 2050 or 2060 or whatever target we choose. I think the first step.
Is ours?
I don't think that Africa, as Africa, has a vision now, but we are certainly doing a lot towards that, and we think that Egypt, come COP27, we will be able to articulate an African vision, an African initiative, because of course all of the conversation has been dominated by the wealthier countries. They're the ones who defined practically everything about how to respond to climate change. But our own peculiarities are different. Our challenges are different. So we have two challenges. Yes, we have global warming. In fact, we are not just challenged in terms of global warming, but we're also, even sea level increase is much more in Africa than everywhere else. So we have major challenges with global warming. But for us also, there's the existential challenge of just survival. So we need to have access to energy, access to electricity, just to be able to survive, just to be able to create industry for the millions and millions of people who are being born every day in this part of the world. So Africa has an existential challenge about survival, about our economies. So we can't just say, well, for now, let's just forget all about, industry. We need industry. Absolutely need industry. How do we get industry without gas as transition fuel? So where the rest of the world is saying that, look, all of these are not clean energy anymore, forget about them and go to renewable energy. No one in the world has yet been able to industrialize using renewable energy. So we are being asked to industrialize using renewable energy, using solar power, when everybody in the world knows that you need gas, you need gas-powered industry for baseload, just for baseload alone. How do you do industry without gas-powered industry? So I think we're in a peculiar position, and so this is the reason why I think Africa has to come together to say, look, our needs are different from yours, and we need to chart a different path to carbon neutrality by 2060 or 2070 or whenever it is that we think is right and appropriate.
Well answered. Mr. Zubairu talks about the need for a unified narrative, and I think many people in the room would agree with you about the need for that unique approach to African problems. But some might push back and say, well, we're talking about innovation. This is the chance to innovate. We don't have to do it the way that Western economies did. We have had many years of investing in fossil fuels that haven't led to the development. How can we make sure that as we continue to invest in fossil fuels, for instance, huge projects in Mozambique, but a lot of that gas for export and not necessarily for lighting up the country itself, how do we make sure the investments we continue to make in fossil fuels benefit our populations?
Well, I think that is really the way to go, and you're absolutely right, that we need to have investments in fossil fuels that benefit us. And now the argument is clearly turning in that direction. Everyone is saying, yes, we need energy access for development. And that's evident to everyone. So I'm sure that just the force of the logic of that will make it inevitable for African leadership to see that that's absolutely the way to go. We in Nigeria have over 260 trillion cubic feet of gas. Where are we going to put all that gas? So we absolutely need to be able to invest in gas and make sure that it makes sense for us. Not just, natural gas, and we need it for cooking, we need it for industry. So I think that the sheer force of the logic of being able to benefit our own communities will make it inevitable for us to invest in fossil fuels that will benefit our own people. Yes.
This is our opportunity to find out what happens behind the scenes, having you here. You're talking about the force of logic, but Is the international community listening to your arguments? How are they responding to what you say about this?
Well, I mean, first, I'm not vain enough to even imagine that what I say will influence the international community. But I must say that there are several voices all over the world that are saying much the same thing. Several voices in Africa, for instance, President Nana Akufo-Addo, and several others. Our President Muhammadu Buhari, so many are saying more or less the same things. And I think that there is some resonance. I think that there is some change. So the EU, for example, has categorized nuclear and gas as green investments, which is a very good thing. And they're saying that they're going to need more investments in gas over the next 10 years just to be able to meet their targets for 2050. So they're leaving us room to say that if you are going to invest in fossil fuels for the next 10 years to meet your targets, hey, guess what? We in Africa are going to need another 30 years or so to be able to meet our targets. So I think that the conversation is opening up. People are certainly listening, and I think around the table, there's a lot more understanding and awareness of the actual challenges that developing countries face.
That's a positive note to end on. Thank you so much for gracing us with your time today. Please